Hi everyone, and welcome to this video where we look at another member of my classic computer collection. And today we're going to have a look at this machine. This is the Sinclair QL, an interesting machine by any accounts. So let's have a look at it. The Sinclair QL was a British machine produced by Sinclair Research. This company, with their charismatic and colourful owner Clive Sinclair, who you can see here, had dominated British home computing for several years with the highly successful ZX81 and ZX Spectrum. Now these were great home machines, but Sir Clive wanted desperately to get into the business market. The QL, which stood for Quantum Leap, was going to be the machine to do it. Unfortunately, it was not to be. For a number of reasons, design compromises were made, which means the machine was unattractive to even small businesses. Many things went wrong, but rather than detail all of them in this video, I'll point you to a fascinating account of the QL debacle on the Planet Sinclair website. I've put a link to the article in the description of the video, so check it out once you've watched this. It's a great read. In a nutshell, the writer describes how the QL project drifted during a fairly lengthy development phase and how it really suffered from a lack of project management. Now this was disastrous at a time when technology was virtually changing by the month. A symptom of this disarray was that the machine was announced for sale in January 1984 with a waiting time of 28 days to delivery, yet Sinclair Research didn't even have a working prototype in existence, let alone a robust consumer item. The machine was highly anticipated. After all, Sir Clive was the darling of the British microcomputer industry, and the market was expecting something exciting. Sinclair Research's marketing department pulled out all the stops to get potential customers salivating, showing ads featuring a long, jumping Sir Clive making a quantum leap over the current crop of business machines, and extolling the features of the QL in many advertisements, such as this one. Through 1984, units were delivered late and were full of issues and problems. Eventually these were sorted, but even with the fixes, the QL promised far more than it delivered, and it failed dismally to live up to the hype. Once reviewers got hold of units, they could see Sir Clive hadn't pulled that third rabbit out of the hat after all, and a kind of respectful puzzlement was the tone of many of the articles. The machine started to appear here in New Zealand about a year after being announced, and it can be seen here on the cover of our national computer magazine, New Zealand Bits and Bytes, dated March 1985. Now bear in mind that by 1985 in New Zealand, like a lot of other Western countries, IBM PCs and XT clones were firmly ensconced in the business market, and the home market was running out of steam, although still being dominated by the now very cheap Commodore 64. So let's have a look at the machine itself. So here's my own unit, set up for display, snuggled up to its Microdrives software library, and running its standard word processing package called QL. So for a closer look, and let's check out the keyboard first. It's the same keyboard that's used on the ZX Spectrum Plus. It's full stroke, but it's not what I would call a professional keyboard. It uses a membrane and has a clunky, cheap feel. Certainly not a keyboard which would endear the machine to the business market. It's also flat, not angled, although the QL was sold with clip-on feet, so you could angle up the computer for easier typing. The biggest problem to market acceptance of the QL was these: the ill-fated microdrives. Now, main storage technology using small continuous wafers might have been feasible prior to 1982, say, when disk drives cost the earth, but by 1984, 5¼ disk drives were much cheaper, and they were a standard fitting on all business machines. The microdrives were slower, and in the main less reliable than standard disk drives. Businesses simply didn't take them seriously. They were also a problem for the home and hobby market. In the UK, a lot of home software was distributed on cassette tapes. There was no cassette interface for the QL, meaning software publishers needed to distribute QL software in microdrive wafers. Not many did. Here's a close-up shot of some of these wafers. They're quite sturdy and smaller than a credit card. Just coming around now to the side of the QL, it really is a long black slab. If you look carefully, you can see a reset button tucked away there just on the right. Coming around the back and moving from left to right, we can see a couple of sockets for a local area network. Apparently you could link machines together using these. Then there's a power socket. Remarkably, there's no power switch. So to switch off and on, you simply unplug the cord, just like the ZX Spectrum and the ZX81. Now, like the drives and the keyboard, to me, this is just penny pinching at its worst. I doubt if a simple switch would have added much to the cost of the machine. Next we have an RGB socket, and next to that a UHF outlet, which allows users to use a television for the screen. This was a nod to the home market, and important given that the QL wasn't sold with a screen of its own. Further along we have a couple of serial ports. Now note the connectors are not the standard DB25 or DB9 types that were common for this purpose in those times. Consequently, you need a special cable. The same can be said of the two joystick ports further along. And note there's no parallel port. Now this was a standard port for the ubiquitous dot matrix printers of the day. The absence of a parallel port was another nail in the QL's business market ambitions. Finally we come to the ROM port. Now this allows various utility programs to be added. First QLs came with a ROM already plugged in, the infamous dongle, which was there because the board had not been designed to take as much ROM as it ended up needing. A redesign did away with the dongle though, and it freed up this port for other things. Continuing round to the other side and prizing off a cover, we can see this expansion port. I'll show this in use a little later on in this video. Lastly, the external power supply completes the machine. Now these external PSUs were quite common on home machines, but the extra clutter certainly wasn't welcome in a business environment. So here's the QL with its innards exposed. You can see the microdrives here on the right and the main board there in the middle. You can see the membrane, part of the keyboard, that I've pulled back for a better view. Here's a close-up of the main board. The CPU was the 68008, which was a member of the 32-bit microprocessor family. It was a very modern chip family at the time, so Sinclair Research Marketing made a lot of this. In reality, though, this fast microprocessor was hobbled by an 8-bit data bus, which slowed down the system considerably. Now, one thing that normally came with your QL was a suite of office programs by Scion Software. They came in this little sort of wallet-shaped compartment here, and you can see there are 4 Microdrive wafers. So this is what they look like. That's the size, and they have a little cover on them. You just peel the cover off, and there's the Microdrive wafer there. We'll have a look at these packages a little later on in this video. So that's what you got when you got your QL. The previous owner of my QL had a small library of wafers, so there they are arranged in this nice little box. Now, when I was preparing for filming, I loaded in one of these microdrive wafers, and it loaded just fine. I managed to load QL up and get it going. But now that I'm filming a course, I'm having a lot more difficulty. So I've tried to load this several times, so let's just try again. I'm not confident that it will work. And this is one of the problems. These wafers were never that reliable, and of course as time's gone on, they've even got more unreliable, and most of my wafers now don't work at all. They come up with some sort of error. Now the machine's just booting, and it should automatically load the software off this wafer, but no, we've got an error message, so it's just not going to happen, unfortunately. So these wafers might have seemed like a good idea, but nothing beats the good old floppy disk, even these days. And that's why I got one of these, a floppy disk drive interface. Now, a number of disk drive interfaces were made for the QL as an aftermarket product. This is a PCML Q Plus disk interface. Works really well. It can run 3.5-inch disk drives, and in fact that's what most people run with them. But I run a 5.25-inch disk drive. I've got an 80-track double-sided one, and I tend to use that for my QL software. Now, at the same time I acquired the disk interface, I decided to buy this ROM extension. This is Toolkit 2.12, and it's become almost a standard ROM extension for the QL. Gives the QL lots of extra commands, assists with disk management, etc. The disk interface itself has its own toolkit ROM, but this 2.2 is more of a standard one, and so I decided it would be worthwhile me getting it. Now there you can see the case open, and you can see it's just an EPROM plugged in there, and that's designed to plug into the QL. And here you can see it in position. So let's just scan back a bit, and you can see the Sinclair QL now set up for disk operation. Now the disk drive color certainly doesn't match the QL. In fact, I would say it clashes, probably as does the screen at the moment. I originally was using a black screen for these demonstrations, but I found the silver one just tunes a little bit better to the machine. So you can see there the interface plugged in and the cable, and there's the ROM extension. Right, so now we'll boot the machine up, and this is what you see when the machine's doing that. That quickly clears. It shows the ROMs that are fitted, so you can see the toolkit 2.12 there, and also the ROM that's on the disk control interface. And now we're waiting. Now what you can't see is a little message there saying to push F1 if you've got a monitor, or an F2 if you've got a TV screen. So I've just pushed F2. Now what we've got here are essentially two parts of the screen. We've got the top part that's going to show both our program listings and also the results of our program when we run it, and the section at the bottom there which is essentially our editor, so we can type programs in there, and also that'll show any error messages. If I had a proper RGB monitor, I'd actually have three parts to the screen. So that top bit, which is showing the program and will also show the results of the program when we run it, it'll actually, with the three-screen arrangement, you'll have one pane that shows a listing, like we're seeing, and the other pane that shows the results of the program. So this is SuperBASIC. Apparently it was a very, very good BASIC. Now I haven't really played around with it, but from what people have said in the literature I could find, and just looking at the extensive command set, plus the fact that it's very much set up for procedures and functions, it looks pretty impressive. So now I've got a floppy disk in the drive, so we're just going to have a look at what's on that floppy disk. It's actually a Scion chess game, and that's the directory. So we'll boot that up and have a look at it. This is quite a good chess game, and it seems to me fairly speedy. I haven't played a game right through with the software, but it's a nice interface. I have an idea that you can actually get this in 3 dimensions, so there's some button you can push to display it as a 3D chessboard, because I've seen YouTube videos that show this, but I was unaware of that when I shot this footage, so it may actually look more impressive than it is, at least than it is shown here. Now just for the record, I want to show you the boot up screens of the 4 Scion Office programs that came with the QL. This is QL, so this is the word processor. Seems like quite a good program. Like all of these programs, I'm very unfamiliar with them, so I've never really spent that much time with the QL, apart from booting the programs up and having a very small play around. So I'm not really familiar with all their features, but so they display okay. On a TV, as you can see, there's some issues. There's a bit of spread off the screen, for example, at the top there. So that was cool. This is Abacus. Now, a typical spreadsheet sort of pattern that most people will be able to recognise. So you notice at the top there, it's sort of bleeding a bit into the top part of the screen. I'm not sure whether that's just this television or whether it will do that with a lot of televisions. Certainly my black one that I tried it on, it also had some issues. with things moving over to the edge. So this is Archive, the database program. I haven't got any data files I can show you here, but you can see these interfaces are a little similar to each other as we go through these Scion programs. Then we have the last one, which is Easel, which is an interactive graphing program. So this allows the user to create business graphs if they want to. And again, I really haven't played with the software, so I actually don't even know where to start, but that's what the boot up screen looks like anyway. Now, although the QL was marketed as a semi-professional business machine and came with those 4 Office programs, there were some games written for it, and one of these games is Meteors, which is really the old asteroids. So those vintage gamers of my age would recognise this game because it's been developed on many, many platforms. This is the first time I've booted it up on the QL and actually tried to control the ship, so I've had absolutely zero practice, which is why I'm getting wiped out continually. But anyway, I really just put it up here to show you one of the games. So let's have a look at another. This is a game called Eagle, and it really is the old, I think is it the Defender game on the Atari? I know on the TRS-80, that's the machine that I grew up with, at least the System 80, a TRS-80 model clone. This game was called Eliminator, but I think its official title is probably Defender, but someone can correct me if I'm wrong. So you can get this on the QL. Here's another one. Now this is probably closest to a game that I knew of as Galaxians, where you had these things swooping down to attack your base. But you notice they're not firing missiles. They actually have to try and hit you, but their movement is certainly a lot more erratic, so you've actually got to be pretty fast on the keys to try and dodge these things before they collect you. Not easy to do. Used up all my men. Board games are also represented, like chess. This is Scrabble. Some quite nice graphics there for the boot up screen. But when it actually gets to the board, again on a TV, it's not so hot. There's a bit of stretching and there's some bleed, as you'll see in just a moment. Yeah, like that. Same with this one here. This is Reverse Eye. We'll just go into demo mode here. You can see quite a smooth movement, but again on a television, it's just a little distorted, and certainly there's some bleed. As I said, this also occurred on my black television, so not sure if it's the TV, 2 TVs, or it's just something that the QL does on a reasonably modern television. Both of my televisions are ones that automatically tune into the signal, so maybe if I had one of the older manual types, I might be able to get rid of that bleed, but certainly it's here now. Now this is what I get if I push the button that tells the QL that I've actually got a monitor attached. So you can actually see the 3 panes there, and of course there's a lot of bleed because I'm supposed to be working with an RGB monitor, but I'm not. But why I've done this is really just to show you the 3 panes, and you can see I'm typing some text there. So on to the manual, and just a look through this document. Like a lot of computers that were sold at that time from relatively large firms, the manual was pretty good. So it's quite a nice size and a ring binding, well produced, good quality paper, lots of diagrams, sort of leads you through how to use the QL. And it is pretty important because the QL is quite a different computer to a lot of the other ones that were around at the time. It does have a lot of unusual, some would say eccentric aspects to it, or at least aspects that were fairly different to other computers. So if you'd been using, say, a Commodore or TRS-80 or an Apple, many of the things that you'd need to do with QL, and this includes using the SuperBASIC, were quite different. So the manual is divided into various sections. How to use the machine, of course. Then there's a section on SuperBASIC, which is quite comprehensive, has all the commands. And then it goes through the 4 bundled programs, the Scion programs. So you've got QL here. It shows you how to use that. Then you've got the next one here. This is Epicus. Shows you how to use that. And then takes you through Archive, the database program. Shows you what that does. And finally, we've got Easel, the graphing program, and again, it will show you how to use that. There's a bit of information here at the back, some technical notes on various aspects. Bit of time is spent on conversion of files, and also setting up printers, and that's quite an important section because it doesn't have a parallel printer port, so you have to use a serial printer if you're just going to use the standard QL. So there's the manual. Quite a nice document. Good job, Sinclair, with that. I've also got this book on the Sinclair, Maximise Your QL. This was written in 1985. It's a useful book, expands on what the manual can tell you. It's interesting, though, because when you read the introduction, it's almost partly apologetic, or at least they make the case for the QL not being a professional computer, but this computer that's sort of a semi-professional unit. So it's for those that can't afford an expensive business machine but want something slightly more than a home machine. And there are the chapter headings. So, how does one summarize the Sinclair QL? Well, it did have some nifty features, like the built-in networking, for example. It had lots of RAM, came with 128K, and it had a real programmer's BASIC and SuperBASIC. It's a computer that did find a niche amongst hobbyists, and it's supported and improved by a dedicated band of people even to this day. You can find them on the internet. But it's a computer that really failed in the market. And as I mentioned in the beginning, Clive Sinclair originally wanted this as a business machine, but corners were cut, decisions were made, and it actually ended up being pitched and priced at those who couldn't afford a business machine but wanted something that was more than a home machine. So we're talking about the hobbyist, the power user, or the small business owner. Unfortunately, that market wasn't really there. Disk drives had proved their worth as a reliable storage and option, and the QL didn't have them. Software writers didn't want to distribute their wares on wafers. Now, the multitasking operating system QDOS, while powerful, wasn't very user-friendly, and the keyboard wasn't quality. Finally, the delays and the initial problems really damaged credibility. QL lasted just 2 years on the market, and then it was discontinued when Clive Sinclair sold the Sinclair name to Amstrad in 1986. And the rest is history, as they say. But to me, the Sinclair QL is an illustration of just how much microcomputing had matured in 1984. Serious machines needed fast, reliable storage. They needed good keyboards and a degree of standardization, both in software and hardware. Coming up with your own unique standards was a risky business, even if you were Clive Sinclair.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that look at the Sinclair QL. Until the next one, keep well, and we'll see you then.